Solo Sikoa has taken over on WWE SmackDown as the interim leader of the Bloodline amid Roman Reigns' absence. Although that is what he has implied through words, his actions show that the former enforcer has formed a faction of his own. It is more of an extension of the original group consisting only of members of the Anoa'i family, aside from the Wiseman, Paul Heyman. WWE is heading towards its biggest show of the year not named WrestleMania, so there is a major possibility that Roman Reigns will be back sooner rather than later. It appears he has made his first move by unfollowing Sikoa on social media. Conversely, the latter still follows the tribal chief on Instagram. During a promo segment on SmackDown not long ago between Paul Heyman and Kevin Owens, the crowd broke out with a "We Want Roman" chant. The Wiseman responded by stating that there is not one person in the arena who wants Roman Reigns back more than he does. Was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson referring to Roman Reigns' match at WrestleMania 41? In February, The Rock returned to WWE television for a WrestleMania program with the head of the table. The two superstars were often put together by fans in a dream match scenario. However, the timing was not right. People rejected the company's decision to plunge the Attitude Era star into the undisputed WWE Championship picture. They wanted Cody Rhodes to finish the story. The Rock turned the tables in a few days, introducing the final boss character. He wound up aligning with the Bloodline, tagging with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania XL, and winning that match against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. On the Raw after WrestleMania, he told the American Nightmare that the latter has him to worry about, as Rhodes had already defeated Reigns on the grand stage. Recently, while speaking to ESPN, The Rock addressed WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas. "We're on the 1-yard line to create the biggest WrestleMania of all time and the biggest match of all time at WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas. I'll just leave it at that, final boss style," he said. The cryptic message could have indicated one of two scenarios. Either the final boss continues his rivalry with the American Nightmare, which he already hinted at in April, or he finally steps into the ring to face his cousin Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns sat alone in his private locker room, the room dimly lit by a single overhead light. The aura of dominance that usually surrounded him seemed to waver as he watched footage from the latest WWE SmackDown on a large screen. The past few weeks had been tumultuous for the Bloodline, his once unbreakable faction, and the events that had unfolded left him with a whirlwind of emotions. The Bloodline had been the epitome of power and unity in WWE, with Roman Reigns at the helm as the Universal Champion. His cousins, the Usos, had backed him up fiercely, and his younger brother Solo Sikoa had emerged as a formidable force in his own right. But the cracks had begun to show. Tensions within the group were escalating, and Solo's recent actions had pushed the friction to a boiling point. Solo Sikoa, known for his raw strength and no-nonsense approach, had become increasingly unpredictable. His aggressive streak, which once complemented Reigns' calculated ruthlessness, was now causing chaos. Solo's blatant disregard for the strategic plans laid out by Roman had resulted in several close calls, almost costing them crucial matches. The tipping point came when Solo, in a fit of rage, attacked one of their own, Jimmy Uso, during a match, leaving the faction and fans in shock. Roman's face was a mask of contemplation as he replayed the incident in his mind. He knew something had to be done to restore order and remind everyone who was in charge. The locker room door opened, breaking his train of thought. In walked Paul Heyman, his special counsel, carrying the Universal Championship belt over his shoulder. "Tribal Chief," Heyman began, his voice a blend of concern and loyalty, "I've been getting calls from management. They want to know what our next move is. The Bloodline can't appear weak. We need to address this." Roman nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "I know, Paul. Solo's becoming a problem. We can't afford any more mistakes." Heyman stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What do you plan to do, my tribal chief?" Roman stood up, his towering frame casting a long shadow. "I need to remind Solo who he answers to. It's time to reassert my dominance. He's family, but business comes first." The decision weighed heavily on him. He had always prided himself on keeping the bloodline tight-knit, a symbol of Samoan pride and strength. But Solo's actions could no longer be overlooked. He had to act decisively to maintain the faction's supremacy. Later that night, the WWE Universe packed the arena, buzzing with anticipation. Speculations about Roman's reaction to the recent events had been running wild. As the show progressed, the lights dimmed, and the haunting strains of Roman Reigns' entrance music reverberated through the stadium. The audience erupted as the tribal chief emerged, flanked by Heyman. Roman entered the ring, his expression stern. He raised the microphone to his lips, pausing to let the audience's cheers and jeers die down. "Last week," he began, his voice resonating with authority, "we witnessed a betrayal. A betrayal not just of the bloodline, but of everything we stand for." The crowd hushed, hanging on his every word. "Solo," Roman continued, his gaze hardening, "you've lost sight of what it means to be part of this family. Your actions have consequences." The arena lights dimmed further, and Solo Sikoa's music hit. The powerhouse walked down the ramp, his demeanor defiant. He climbed into the ring, facing his brother with a mix of respect and challenge. The tension between them was palpable. "Roman," Solo said, grabbing a mic, "I did what I had to do. Jimmy was out of line, and I dealt with it. Just like you'd have done." Roman shook his head slowly. "No, Solo. I handle things differently. Strategically. Your impulsiveness is a liability." The crowd watched in rapt attention as the brothers faced off. Roman's expression softened slightly, a hint of the familial bond showing through. "I brought you into the bloodline because I saw potential in you, but you need to remember who the head of the table is." Without warning, Roman struck, delivering a Superman punch that sent Solo staggering. The crowd gasped, the shockwave of the move reverberating through the arena. Solo, stunned but not down, rose to his feet, a look of fury in his eyes. The two collided in a fierce brawl, trading blows with a ferocity that underscored their shared heritage. Heyman watched from ringside, his face a mask of concern. This was not just a fight for dominance, but a battle for the soul of the bloodline. As the exchange grew more brutal, Roman seized the upper hand, locking Solo in the guillotine choke, a move that had felled many of his opponents. Solo struggled, his strength waning, but he eventually tapped out. Roman released him, breathing heavily, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. He leaned down, speaking so only Solo could hear. "Your family, Solo. But if you ever cross me again, you'll be out for good." The show ended with Roman standing tall, the Universal Championship held high above his head. The message was clear: the bloodline was his domain, and anyone who threatened its unity would face his wrath, family or not. Backstage, the atmosphere was tense. Roman knew this confrontation would have repercussions, but it was a necessary move to preserve the integrity of the bloodline. Heyman approached, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did what you had to, tribal chief. The bloodline will be stronger for it." Roman nodded, though the weight of his actions still pressed heavily on him. He hoped that Solo would understand the lesson, that this brutal reminder was meant to bring him back into the fold, not push him away. Family was everything, but respect and loyalty were paramount. As Roman walked through the corridors of the arena, the echoes of the crowd's reactions still ringing in his ears, he resolved to steer the bloodline through this storm. They had faced many challenges, and they would face many more, but as long as he remained the undisputed leader, the bloodline would endure, stronger than ever.